Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, it's 3 o'clock. That means it's Tech Tuesday. Today's topic is cybersecurity and botnets and the Internet of Things. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here from Zcorum. So cybersecurity is something that every organization should be taking seriously, especially these days. It seems like there's a cop versus robber kind of thing going on where there'll be different kinds of malware that's out there, and then we'll find ways to circumvent that, and then they get more sneaky. So there's a lot of sophistication in these attacks. So today I'm going to be looking at a report that talks a little bit about some of the activity from last year. Specifically, really, it's kind of covering botnets. I'll talk about what that is, and then also leveraging IoT devices for that. So again, we'll cover that as well. So again, thanks for joining me today. If you're not subscribed, you can click the little subscribe. There should be a little button down in the right-hand corner of the screen. You can subscribe. I'll also put up a screen at the end. But anytime you're on YouTube, you can hit subscribe, click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. So again, thanks for joining me today. So this is the report. It's the Council to Secure the Digital Economy, and this is something that was done for I think it was US Telecom, International Botnet and IoT Security Guide 2022. Yeah, US Telecom, the Broadband Association. And it's a nice quick review. I'll go ahead and post a link to this at the end. And then also I'll post a few, I mentioned a few particular threats here that I'll post some information on those if you wanted to look a little bit more into how to mitigate some of these things. But again, this is kind of a year in review. They talk about some of the things that are going on, some of the things to look for. So it mentions here that there's been some progress. So many of the key innovators leading the charge as far as this organization make up the Council to Secure the Digital Economy. It's got Akamai, AT&T, Cisco, Ericsson, IBM, Intel, Lumen, NEC, NTT, Oracle, Panasonic, Samsung, SAP, Telefonica, and Verizon. So it's good to know that these organizations are kind of all pooling their resources and trying to make sure that we have mitigation policies and procedures in place, both their organizations, but also recommendations for what others should be doing. Since the CSDE first published its guide to fighting botnets and securing IoT, we've seen increased focus on security assurance and technology solutions to combat botnets holistically, as well as awareness of the importance of equipping devices with baseline security capabilities. So what is a botnet? Basically, a botnet is could be a group of PCs. Your PC could be part of a botnet. You might not even know that. So PCs, laptops. It could be IoT devices or Internet of Things devices. What's the Internet of Things? That's basically everything that's connected to the internet, and generally it's talking about things that we're not necessarily physically using. So your PC, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, those are not really IoT devices. IoT devices would be things like your television, your thermostat, if it's connected to the internet, if you've got a smart thermostat, smart devices basically. If you've got or video cameras, the video cameras that you've got, maybe watching outside your home, that's an IoT device. There's lots of measurement devices, industrial IoT that are measuring things and reporting back to servers. So these are all devices that are connected to the internet, and they can be vulnerable. So botnet, again, is something, they call them zombies. If you've got a bunch of users, computers out there that are infected as part of a botnet, they call them zombies, and they can then be leveraged. This army of computers could be leveraged to then attack things on the internet. So a lot of times if you are part of a botnet, you're not necessarily going to be harmed yourself as part of that attack, but they're using you to harm others is what it comes down to. So again, that can use PCs, but if you've got smart devices in your home and there's vulnerabilities in one or more of those can be used as part of this botnet as well. So that's kind of what they're talking about here. Technology solutions that help combat botnets evolve continuously. We've seen increased adoption of these capabilities in the market, including in the IoT ecosystem. Automatic onboarding capabilities that remove the need for default passwords using embedded cryptographic credentials have developed, and so did the adoption of trusted onboarding mechanisms for IoT devices. So one of the issues they've had in the past is that a lot of these IoT devices had default usernames and passwords. So it's kind of like when you would get a router and the password would be password, and you were supposed to go in there and change it. Or the login would be admin. Well, these have got these defaults, or have, a lot of them have, and a lot of them still have, or a lot of them have, and a lot of them had these default logins and passwords, and therefore these criminals, malware experts would go out and search for these unprotected devices, and then they would bring that into their botnet army. As technological capabilities advanced, cooperation between industry and law enforcement to take down high-profile botnets has yielded notable results. In early 2021, law enforcement disrupted Emotet, referred to as the world's most dangerous malware by Interpol in Europe and Europol, with an international takedown operation. In October, a Russian national was arrested in connection with the TrickBot malware and extradited by the U.S. Department of Justice. And then also they mentioned a particular botnet in here called Cyclops, and that was just recently dismantled by the U.S. As well. So that doesn't mean it's done, but they did stop it in this particular case. Despite these continuing advances, we face challenges as a global connected community. They talk about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine here as opening up some issues. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic shift to remote and hybrid work arrangements has drastically expanded the attack surface for botnets. So you think about that, you suddenly have a lot of people who are not working at home before who are, at least they were at some point. Some have gone back and some are continuing to work at home. So that being the situation, then you've got these connections, people might be connected to their work network, so you've got kind of more vectors to come in that way. So the people in the IT department of work need to make sure that they're protecting not just their own network, but those that are connecting to it through something like a VPN, for example. And they mentioned here with IoT devices, estimated to reach 30.9 billion, so almost 31 billion IoT devices by 2025, the potential arsenal of botnets will continue to grow. So again, as more of these devices that we're not really holding on to, they're just out there connected to the internet, as more of those are put out in service, we'll have more opportunities, or there'll be more opportunities for those to be compromised and become part of a botnet. Now, as far as, again, sometimes you'll hear that the botnets, the malware that is being used in these botnets affects certain kinds of equipment. And it may be that, well, I don't have that equipment, so I don't need to worry about it. But again, that doesn't mean anything as far as you could still be attacked by a botnet that is using some piece of equipment that you don't have. So you always need to be aware of that. That talks here about the Cyclops Blink botnet. On February 23rd, the US and UK governments issued advisories warning that Russia's Sandstorm hacking group has built a botnet out of firewall devices. And these are particularly the WatchGuard firewall and I think ASUS routers that are involved in this. So again, you might not have a WatchGuard firewall or an ASUS router, but there's like 250,000 of those WatchGuard firewalls around the world. So if there's some number of those that have not been, where this has not been mitigated or protected or patched, then you've got that number of devices that can attack somebody else. Research discovered the botnets had been amassing resources since 2019 and appears capable of compiling malware for various types of architectures and firmware besides those. If it actively exploits a notable feature, oh, I'm sorry, I misread that. So compiling malware for various types of architectures and firmware besides those it actively exploits. So there's other things that it could possibly exploit. A notable feature of Cyclops Blink is that it persists when a system is rebooted because it's deployed as part of the legitimate firewall update process. So you might think I can just reboot my device and then it'll be gone, but it will persist. Now this is the one I believe, I was reading that this one was taken down by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, I think in this country as well as in other countries. And it seems at the moment that they were able to mitigate the attack that was planned from Russia. I believe it was planned on the Ukraine. So, but again, these things persist, as we'll see. You can knock these out. And in some cases, they're a little bit easier to knock out because they have a centralized command and control. So you've got this network of botnets, or this network of bots, or this botnet that's out there, and they're all reporting back to a centralized command and control server. And if you can get that server out of the way, then suddenly the bots out there become useless as far as that particular attack potential. But in some cases, it's not, as we'll see. So then we've got Mirai. Mirai continues spawning variants. Botnet Go source code leaks. Mirai is Japanese for future, and I think they probably named it that because this one seems to morph into other things. So With many dozens of Mirai variants in existence and new ones constantly being discovered, the notorious IoT botnet family continues to prove its staying power. Its source code having been leaked back in 2016, enabling hackers of many different skill levels to utilize and modify it as they see fit. And that's one of the things about these things is people will develop this malware that can control bots. And they basically, it's like an application. They modularize it so that they can then publish that, or it will get leaked out there, and then others can pick that up and develop their own. They can just use it as it is. So you can have, they call them script kiddies. So you can have people that really don't know a lot about programming, could never create their own malware, but then they can download this off of somewhere off of the dark web, and then they can use it themselves. It's probably as easy as plugging in different, configuration settings. Who you're going to attack, the IP address of that, and whatever, what the configuration settings are. So unfortunately, it makes it very easy for anybody who has bad intentions to be able to go out and get this stuff and perform some kind of a attack using these botnets. The newer botnets are increasingly resourceful. Of course, Mirai is far from the only botnet on the IoT attack scene. January 2022, Botnetigo, which shares some similarities to Mirai but is written in a different programming language, was leaked online. So that's another one that was leaked online. It mentions here that it's got only 2,891 lines of code, so they're very efficient. Has the potential to be a starting point for many new variants and new malware families using its source code. So again, people will take that and either use it as it is, or they'll take that as a starting point and then develop new kind of unique ways to use it. So we might think we have it figured out on how to mitigate something because it's attacking a certain way and doing certain things, and then suddenly they'll make little changes to it. So again, it's kind of a cops versus robber paradigm here. Botnet campaigns are currently exploiting the log4 shell. So botnets exploiting log4j vulnerability. That vulnerability impacts a wide range of systems that make use of Apache log4j versions. Not sure exactly how it's pronounced, and it mentions these versions here, but that is it's a Java-based utility in Apache. Apache is a open source web hosting platform, so lots and lots and lots of people use Apache. It's it's something that, again, it's open source, so you can download that source code or that package for web hosting. You can set up your own web service. Lots of companies do that. They use that rather than getting some commercial program because it's free, right? And it's been around a long, 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 long time, and it's really stable. For open source, but just like any software, even commercial software, you're going to find vulnerabilities, and this is one in there in this Java portion of things. It says botnet campaigns are currently exploiting the log4 shell to infect vulnerable systems. Many actors with different objectives ranging from financial to espionage will rapidly adopt this exploit to secure access for immediate use, resale, or long-term footholds. So that's, people that are using these botnets and leveraging these kinds of things are doing it for different reasons. In some cases, they're trying to steal information. It mentions financial, so it could be that a lot of times they'll use it as a diversionary tactic. So they'll use a botnet to launch a DDoS attack against a bank, some institution like that. And then while everybody's focused on trying to figure out what's going on there, they'll come in some other back door and steal funds or something like that. So they're using it that way. They'll use it for hacktivism. So a lot of times it is DDoS that they're using them for. So all these little bots that are out there can each one sends a small request to a server. It could be a DNS request, or I think a UDP request, or other things that will just make that server, a normal amount of traffic would be no problem. When you get 1,000 or 50,000, or depending on the request, it might just be 100 of devices sending something to some server, it can bring it to its knees. So in some cases, it might be, hacktivism is they're mad at somebody, at some organization, so they'll take their site down. It could be a disgruntled employee doing something like that. So there's all kinds of different reasons to do that. It mentions espionage, financial or espionage. Random DDoS attacks on the rise, or ransom DDoS attacks on the rise. So this would be another reason that somebody might use this, specifically, leveraging DDoS and ransomware together. So in Q4 2021, there was 29% year over year and 175% quarter over quarter increase in these types of attacks. So Ransomware is where, that's where you will have, a lot of times it's that somebody will get on a company's computer or server, they'll get in the network, they'll get to a database server, something like that, and they'll lock it down. So suddenly, the company will go to access some of their data. It could be all of their customer data, it could be their billing system, it could be anything that's kind of mission critical. And then suddenly all of that data is locked up and they can't get to it. So the ransomware people, they'll tell them, well, you need to pay us, some amount of money. A lot of times it's in Bitcoin, something that's harder to track, easier to transfer, where it can't be tracked. And that way they can get back access, access back to their data. Well, here they're talking about ransom DDoS attacks, a similar kind of thing. So you can see here they mentioned some of the reasons. It says ransom attacks in general become increasingly complex, especially when combined with DDoS attacks. For example, attackers steal victims' data before encrypting it and demand two ransoms, one for decrypting the data, another for deleting the stolen data from the attacker's servers. So they've got the data locked up, and then they also have a copy of it, and they'll say, we'll unlock it, plus if you pay, the second ransom is so that we don't share this with everybody else. Attackers victimize third parties. For example, they may demand ransom victims, clients, and suppliers, or they may target employees, customers, business partners, and others with spear phishing attacks. Then it talks about DDoS attacks here, often enabled by botnets, are used to increase pressure on victims. So you might have your ransomware thing going on, and then a DDoS attack at the same time to increase that pressure. High-profile ransomware groups such as Hello Kitty. I've been using this technique. That sounds so friendly, Hello Kitty, but no. Ransomware such as Yanluowang instructs victims not to contact law enforcement and third parties such as ransomware negotiators. So victims who do not comply with these instructions risk becoming targets of DDoS attacks. So they may have their data locked up, and if the malware folks find out that they have contacted the police, then they'll launch a DDoS attack at the same time. So, and it mentions here the Meris botnet shatters DDoS records. The Meris botnet has gained attention for security researchers because it targets routers and negotiating hardware with great processing power, or greater, I guess, processing power than Mirai's targets, resulting in larger scale attacks. Specifically, Meris infects MikroTik networking gear. So again, this is an example of, you may not have a MikroTik router, but there are, I forget how many, I think there might be 250,000 of those also, MikroTik routers out there that are potentially vulnerable to this. So that means that those routers can be used to attack companies or individuals. In the summer of 2021, Meris was responsible for a DDoS attack that reached 17.2 million requests per second, which Cloudflare described as the largest ever reported. Days later, Meris broke this record with a DDoS attack against Yandex that reached 21.8 million requests per second. The technique attackers used to launch such a massive DDoS attack is called HTTP pipelining, which allows the botnet to send multiple requests to a server using a single connection. Meris has certain limitations. For starters, it relies on a MikroTik vulnerability, which was rapidly patched. However, if a router is already infected, merely updating it is not enough to protect the routers. Additional steps are needed, such as changing the password, configuring the firewall, and checking for scripts that weren't created by the legitimate user. And again, with the number of MikroTik routers that are out there, there's a vast number that have not been patched or not been patched correctly. So that's still a vulnerability. Mozi, not dead. Botnets survive, or built to survive post-takedown. So again, you can, something like the Cyclops one that uses a centralized command and control system, you can get rid of that centralized control and take the bot down, but there are other botnets that does not work. So when the operator behind the Mozi botnet was arrested in China in summer 2021, some security researchers prematurely proclaimed Mozi was dead. However, as CSDE anticipated in our 2020 botnet year in review, this botnet has tremendous survivability. This is because Mozi is a peer-to-peer or P2P botnet. So peer-to-peer, that would be something along the lines of BitTorrent, if you're familiar with BitTorrent, or you remember the old other P2P file sharing kinds of sites. Or was Napster one of them? Is that P2P? I think so. And others. So you have this P2P protocol or peer-to-peer protocol So rather than having a centralized server, the way P2P works is you've got different peers. So again, these could be different computers, or I suppose they could be different routers, but let's say different computers out there that are acting peer-to-peer, just like you would be in a BitTorrent kind of situation where you might have a file on your computer and other people have files on their computers, and you guys can share those back and forth because you're all peers and you're doing this peer-to-peer thing. Well, these botnets can be set up that way as well. P2P botnets distribute control among all nodes on a network. So again, all of the different infected bots are basically become, in a way, the control center, making it much harder for security experts to truly take these botnets down, even after an arrest is made. The only way a botnet like Mozi can disappear permanently is if every one of its targets is updated or altogether replaced. So that's every infected computer out there needs to be basically fixed or replaced. A process that normally takes years. As many P2P botnets are developed, security experts brace for a future where bots, often analogized, they make an analogy to zombies. That's hard to say. Analogized to zombies. Wander through the ecosystem long after their proclaimed death. And that's why they do call these botnets zombies. They primarily call them that because the people don't know, like if you got your computer out there, you don't know it's necessarily infected and doing these things. But also, they're making a good analogy here in that even though it looks like the botnet is dead, these computers are still out there kind of doing their thing, wandering around like these zombies, because as far as they know, they've still got this distributed P2P control system that they're all working off of. And then government services targeted. A DDoS attack launched using a CLDAP reflection vector against Belnet was so successful it knocked nearly the entire Belgium government offline. So you've been seeing a lot of this where local governments are attacked with these ransomware requests. It could be a DDoS attack. And again, they could be for different reasons. It could be to take the government website down because people are mad at the government. It could be that they are doing this as part of a ransomware attack. It could be a DDoS attack or a ransomware attack where, again, they lock up the data of that local government, city or whatever, and then they get a ransom to be able to release that. That's happened to several governments. I think it even happened here in Atlanta. And sometimes people pay that, sometimes they don't. And unfortunately, with ransomware, a lot of times whoever's being attacked, the company or the government or whoever, a lot of times they wind up paying the ransom because it's just easier and it's really a significant issue. On something like a DDoS attack, you can a lot of times mitigate that. Well, you can definitely mitigate it. If you've got DDoS protection software, you can mitigate it. And if you don't, you can get something in place and you can do other things to kind of take the pressure off for a while with filtering out different IP addresses. But a lot of times it does take a DDoS solution. We have one, by the way, so stick around at the end if you don't have our contact info as far as DDoS solutions. So again, these local government services are being attacked as well. Data theft and credential stuffing attacks are on the rise. Credential stuffing refers to when malicious actors attempt to break into services using credentials stolen during data breaches. Nowadays, malicious actors trade and sell large databases of stolen credentials on the black market. Credential stuffing attacks often target financial services. So a lot of times you'll hear, I don't know how many I've gotten, but you'll hear about, specific service you may have used in the past was hacked and, a certain amount of information was stolen. Sometimes it's just names and addresses, but sometimes it is credentials, user credentials. Sometimes, unfortunately, the way these systems were set up, if they were really stupid, the credentials are in plain text where people actually have the username and password, which is why it's always a good idea. Number one, always a good idea to have a different login and password to every service you are subscribed to. I know that's crazy because you're probably subscribed to a whole bunch of them. And there are some utilities you can use that will, if you search, I can't think of any offhand, but that will store passwords and securely log in so you don't need to remember everything and you can have your own little ways of remembering things or doing certain things, but you really do need to do that because at least on the most important things. So you want to make sure that your Yahoo login and password is not the same as your bank, right? Because if somebody gets into Yahoo and gets your username and password from that, then they could log into your bank and wipe you out. So make sure that you're using, number one, a different login and password for every website. Make sure that you're using good, strong passwords. Don't rely on 5 characters or whatever the minimum is. If the minimum is 5, do 10. If the minimum is 8, do more than that, and make sure that you use don't use easy words that are in the dictionary. One of the easiest things to do is just go through every word in the dictionary, and if you've got words like that in there, they're gonna crack that. Make sure that you use special characters and things that nobody could really guess, to make it really as hard as possible. Because when you have these botnets, what they're talking about here, when you've got a botnet out there, they can get these credentials, and let's say they just have usernames. They know, okay, all of these people are customers of this particular bank, and we know their username is this. We couldn't get the password because it was encrypted. We know their username is this. Then they can just start beating on that system with all of these botnets over time, trying to crack that, and they're going to use the most, they're gonna have certain ones, like common passwords that they're going to use. And now hopefully most banks have got some pretty strong password requirements in there, but they're still going to be attacking in that way. And when you have lots of different resources doing that, and you do this brute force attack, then you can have some success there. So the researchers at Akamai noted that credential stuffing attracts some of the most sophisticated hackers, resulting in highly sophisticated bots. Sophisticated bots mutate. Many bot management solutions can detect most bots initially, but then lose that ability as the bots start mutating. So it's funny how much it is like a virus. We hear about computer viruses, and that's really kind of what these are, this malware. So it is very much like a virus in that it can mutate. You think you've got it killed, and then it's off hiding somewhere, and it comes back, and it's different. And just like your body, your body was set up to protect you against a certain virus, and it mutates, and then you've got to develop antibodies for that. So again, it's back and forth. So very important. Make sure that you are taking care of your own security if you're just on your personal internet use, but then also obviously if you're in IT, hopefully you're aware of all of these kinds of things. If you are heading a business, hopefully you make sure your IT people are aware of all of these things. If you're an internet service provider, very important, because people rely on you for their internet connection. And as I mentioned, we have a DDoS solution, for example. So if you are an internet service provider of any kind, and you do not have a DDoS solution in place, you need to seriously be thinking about that, because more and more of these DDoS attacks are attacking smaller businesses, and small businesses, there's a lot of ISPs that are small businesses, and they're attacking places where they can have a big impact. And obviously if you're an ISP and somebody takes you down, and that takes down every one of your subscribers, they're having a big impact. So if you need more information about DDoS and how we can help you, just go to our website. You see there, zcorm.com. Give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to respond to that and tell you all about it. So thanks for joining me for Tech Tuesday. I appreciate it. If you liked the video, please give me a like on YouTube. And again, if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button on YouTube, or down in the right corner of the video, you'll see something there you can click on. If you do subscribe, click the little bell and you'll be notified whenever I'm live. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.